The hum of diesel engines and the smell of burnt coffee hung in the air like old ghosts at the edge of the Texas highway. The sun was dipping low, smearing the horizon with orange and dust. A place like this truck stop, half diner, half gas station, all forgotten, was where travelers came to disappear for a while. Inside, the booths were cracked vinyl, the jukebox silent, the fluorescent lights flickering like they were tired too. A few truckers sat hunched over plates of meatloaf, eyes glazed from miles of asphalt. At the far end of the counter sat a man alone, his back straight despite the years on his shoulders. He was in his late 50s, maybe early 60s, built like someone who used to be carved from stone and hadn't yet softened. His hands were thick, scarred, veins like cables. His dark skin caught the light when he lifted his coffee cup, the faint tremor in his fingers almost hidden by habit. The cap on his head said U.S. Army veteran, faded, frayed at the brim, the kind of thing you don't buy for fashion. The waitress, a woman in her 40s with tired kindness in her eyes, called him, sir, every time she poured a refill. He didn't talk much, just nodded with a quiet, thank you, ma'am, and stared at the highway through the window like he could still see something out there worth remembering. Then came the roar. 5 bikes, loud enough to rattle the glass, stormed into the parking lot. Engines revved for no reason except to announce that peace and quiet were over. The waitress rolled her eyes. Great. The Locust crew's back. The man at the counter didn't move. He just set his cup down gently, as if the noise were a passing storm he'd seen 1,000 times before. The front door banged open, and they spilled in, a pack of swaggering men wrapped in leather and arrogance. Their jackets bore a red skull emblem, and their faces were hidden behind beards, sunglasses, and beer breath. They laughed too loudly, shoved each other toward the counter, and acted like they owned the place. The leader, a tall, wiry man with blonde hair slicked back and a jagged scar down his cheek, grinned when he spotted the veteran sitting alone. He leaned toward his buddies. Look what we got here. Grandpa Soldier's having himself some diner coffee. Another one snickered. Bet he tells war stories to anyone dumb enough to listen. The waitress stiffened, but before she could say anything, the leader strutted up to the veteran's stool. His boots clicked on the tile. He stopped close, too close, and tilted his head like a cat playing with a mouse. Nice hat, old man, he said, voice dripping with mockery. You actually earn that, or just buy it off eBay to impress folks. The diner went silent. Even the jukebox seemed to be holding its breath. The veteran didn't look up right away. He took another sip, set the cup down carefully, and finally turned his gaze toward the man. His eyes were calm, not cold, just calm, like deep water right before a storm. I earned it, he said quietly. The leader chuckled. Yeah, bet you did. Probably peeling potatoes in the kitchen, huh? His friends laughed, loud and ugly. The waitress tried to step in. Hey, you boys need something. Coffee, pie. Relax, sweetheart, the leader said, not looking at her. We're just talking to our hero here. The veteran's expression didn't change. He studied the man like he was reading a book he'd already finished years ago. Then he turned back to his coffee, signaling the conversation was over. That small act, ignoring them, was gasoline on fire. The leader slammed his palm on the counter. I'm talking to you, old man. The cup rattled but didn't spill. The veteran didn't flinch. He slowly looked up again, eyes narrowing slightly, and for a heartbeat the biker hesitated. There was something in that look, something steady and unafraid, that reached right past the leather and tattoos and found the boy still hiding underneath. Son, the veteran said softly, you don't want this. The biker laughed again, but there was a nervous edge this time. Oh, I think I do. His buddies snorted and elbowed each other, trying to get the courage back in the air. The veteran turned back to the window, his reflection caught in the glass, the cap, the scars, the silent composure of a man who'd seen worse than bullies with bikes. His hand brushed the side of his duffel bag resting by his stool, where a corner of a folded American flag peeked out. Outside, the last light of day faded. The shadows stretched long across the floor, crawling toward the boots of the men who didn't yet realize they'd picked the wrong man to bother. And at that moment, before a word more was said, the waitress saw something in the veteran's eyes, something that wasn't anger, or fear, or pride. Just patience. The kind of patience that comes from knowing exactly how much you can take before you decide you've had enough. The air outside the diner was cooler now, the sunset bleeding into the horizon like an open wound. The rumble of the bikers' engines had died down, leaving only the whisper of wind across the cracked asphalt. The veteran stepped out quietly, carrying his duffel bag in one hand and the small receipt from his meal in the other. He didn't look back. The waitress had given him that uneasy look that said please, just go before they cause trouble. But trouble was patient. The gang lingered by their motorcycles, laughing and smoking, pretending not to notice him. He knew that kind of pretending. It was the calm before stupid decisions. The leader, the one with the scar on his cheek, straightened as soon as he saw the veteran heading toward the truck stop pumps. "Well, look who's sneaking off," he called out, his voice carrying across the lot. "Don't run away yet, soldier boy. We were just getting friendly." The veteran didn't respond. He crouched by his old pickup, unscrewing the gas cap. The movements were deliberate, almost serene. His shoulders didn't tense. His back didn't turn. It was as if he'd heard this exact tone before, in some other place, from some other kind of fool. "Hey." The leader's boots scraped the gravel as he started walking closer. The others followed, circling around the pumps, spreading out. 5 men. Leather, denim, chains, beer breath. The smell of gasoline and arrogance mixed thick in the air. One of them, a big guy with a red beard and arms full of tattoos, kicked something on the ground, making a loud clatter. "Yo, boss, maybe he's deaf," he joked. The leader grinned, showing yellowed teeth. "Or maybe he just don't know how to show respect." He reached the truck and leaned against the fender. "You ignoring me, old man?" The veteran replaced the gas cap, stood up, and finally met the man's eyes. His voice was even, low, without a hint of fear. "I don't owe you my attention." That was the wrong answer for men like them. The red-bearded biker took a step forward, chuckling. Damn, he's got a mouth on him. Then, without warning, he reached for the veteran's duffel bag sitting on the ground by the truck bed. The veteran's arm shot out fast, faster than anyone expected, and grabbed the man's wrist in a grip that didn't look human. The biker's smirk vanished, replaced by a grimace of pain. "Let go," the veteran said quietly. The man tried to pull back, but it was useless. The veteran's hand didn't move. He wasn't squeezing to hurt, he was controlling. The kind of control that comes from years of knowing exactly how much force it takes to stop a man without breaking him. "Let go." The leader laughed nervously. "Hey, big guy, no need for that. We're just joking around." The veteran released the biker's wrist and bent down to pick up his bag. The motion revealed something that silenced the laughter completely, a folded American flag tucked neatly inside the open zipper. Beneath it, for just a moment, glinted the edge of a military medal. The big biker stepped back, rubbing his wrist. "What's that, huh? A trophy?" he asked, his voice shaky now, more defensive than mocking. The veteran straightened slowly. "That flag belonged to my brother," he said, his tone stripped bare of emotion. "He didn't make it home." The words hung heavy in the space between them. Even the wind seemed to pause. But the leader, too proud to back down, forced a laugh. "Yeah, maybe he should have picked a better war." The veteran looked at him, not with hate, but with something colder. "Pity." He set his duffel bag in the truck bed and closed the tailgate. Then he turned, his stance subtly shifting. Feet planted, shoulders relaxed, hands at his sides, not threatening, not defensive, just ready. The leader sneered and stepped closer. "You think that stare scares me? I don't think about you enough to be scared," the veteran said. The biker's fist came up fast, a wild swing born of too much pride and too little training. The veteran moved like he'd been waiting for it, ducking, pivoting, catching the man's wrist midair and turning his own body with surgical precision. The motion was smooth, economical. The leader's arm twisted, and in less than a second, he was face down on the gravel with his elbow locked painfully. The others froze. The sound of the leader's groan was the only thing breaking the silence. "Stand down," the veteran said softly. "You'll walk away whole." The red-bearded one reached for his pocket chain, took one step forward, and that's when the veteran's eyes met his. Calm, centered, no anger, no adrenaline. Just the kind of focus that told a story. "I've done this before. I know exactly how this ends. Red Beard stopped cold. The leader cursed and tried to push up, but the veteran released him, stepping back. He didn't chase, didn't threaten, just adjusted his cap and turned toward the diner again, as if none of it mattered. The gang stood there, humiliated and quiet, unsure what had just happened. The leader got to his knees, clutching his arm, glaring but not daring to move again. The veteran opened the diner door, and before stepping inside, he said without turning around, "Next time you want to pick a fight, make sure the man hasn't already survived worse than you." The door swung shut behind him, leaving 5 silent men in the fading light, their engines cold and their courage cooling faster. The soft clink of a coffee cup on porcelain broke the silence in the diner. The air inside was warmer, calmer, as if the walls themselves had sighed in relief after the storm outside. The veteran sat back at the same stool, the one by the corner window. His jacket was still dusty from the parking lot, but his hands were steady again. He stirred the fresh cup the waitress had poured him, black, no sugar, no cream, and watched the reflection of the neon lights ripple across the dark liquid. The waitress stood behind the counter, her mouth half open as if she wanted to ask 100 questions but didn't know where to start. Finally, she managed, "They gone?" He nodded without looking up. "They'll think twice before trying something like that again." She hesitated, her hand tightening on the coffee pot. "You didn't hurt them bad, did you?" He gave the faintest smile. "No, ma'am, just their pride." Outside, the gang was still there, nursing bruises and shame. The leader leaned against his bike, rubbing his arm where it had been twisted. He muttered something under his breath, but no one responded. The others avoided his eyes, busying themselves with their helmets, their gloves, anything that would keep them from acknowledging the quiet truth. They'd been beaten cleanly and efficiently by a man twice their age. One by one, engines roared back to life. Gravel spat from beneath tires as the bikes tore off into the night, their noise fading down the highway like ghosts chased by their own noise. Inside, calm returned. A trucker in the corner booth, who had watched everything through the window with his fork frozen halfway to his mouth, finally exhaled. "Damn," he muttered. "Thought I'd seen tough before." The veteran didn't react. He wasn't interested in applause. He never had been. He just took another slow sip, his mind elsewhere. The waitress, still uneasy, poured herself some coffee and leaned on the counter across from him. "You been in the service long?" He nodded. 22 years. She raised her eyebrows. "That's a lifetime, too, for some." There was weight behind the words, something that made her stop asking questions. She studied his face, the faint scar that cut across his jawline, the distant focus in his eyes, the way he carried himself like the room was still a battlefield and he needed to know every exit. "You ever get tired of it?" she asked softly. He looked at her. "Of what?" "Of fighting. Of having to prove you're still tougher than the world thinks." For a moment, he just stared at the window, where the neon sign flickered open in tired pink letters. Outside, his truck gleamed faintly under the fluorescent light. Then he spoke, slow and deliberate. "You don't fight because you like it. You fight because one day you realize no one else is going to do it right. And when it's done, when you finally get home, you learn that some fights keep following you anyway." The waitress said nothing. There was nothing to say that would fit. A police cruiser rolled into the parking lot, red and blue lights flashing faintly. The sheriff climbed out, a broad man with a worn hat and an easy posture. He stepped into the diner, his boots squeaking on the linoleum. "Evenin', Nora," he greeted the waitress. Then he glanced at the veteran. "Evenin', sir. Heard there was some trouble out here." The waitress gestured toward the empty lot. "Not anymore, Hank. Those bikers got taught a lesson." The sheriff looked at the veteran, recognizing the quiet authority before him. "You the one who handled it?" The veteran shrugged. "Didn't need handling. Just a misunderstanding." The sheriff studied him for a moment, then smiled. "Wish all misunderstandings ended that clean. You need anything?" "Statement, maybe." "No, sir," the veteran said. "I'm just passing through." The sheriff nodded, tipping his hat. "Well, I appreciate a man who keeps order without breaking bones. We don't get many of those anymore." When the sheriff left, the diner went quiet again. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. The veteran reached for his wallet, pulled out a few bills, and slid them under his cup. "You sure you don't want pie?" the waitress asked, her tone lighter now, almost teasing. He chuckled, the sound low and rare. "No, ma'am, just coffee and quiet. That's enough for me." He stood, picking up his duffel bag. The waitress noticed the way he handled it, with care, like it carried something sacred. "Take care of yourself, soldier," she said softly. He paused at the door. "That's what I've been trying to do," he replied. Then, before stepping out, he added, "Thank you, for the coffee." Outside, the air was cool, the night open and endless. He looked out toward the road, the stretch of dark ribbon leading away into nowhere. Somewhere out there were people like those. Bikers. Loud, angry, lost. But somewhere else were the ones who remembered what it meant to stand your ground without cruelty, to fight without hate. He climbed into his old truck, turned the key, and the engine rumbled to life. For a long moment, he sat there, watching the neon reflection fade in his rearview mirror. Then he smiled faintly, almost to himself. "I've been okay since the day I came home," he murmured, echoing his own truth. The truck pulled out slowly, merging with the night. Behind him, the diner's lights glowed like a beacon in the dark, steady and small, a reminder that not every battle ends in noise. Some just end in peace.